Alright, hey everybody, welcome back to part two. So in part two, we've got a lot of ground to cover, so let's hit the ground running and try to get it over with, alright? So we're going to talk about group decision making. Alright, we're going to talk about process loss, I'll tell you what that is. We'll talk about group think. Again, tell you what that is. We'll talk about how the group can polarize people's positions. We'll talk about group leaders, which will include a discussion of leadership discussion. Again, I'm going to talk about leadership styles and gender in leadership. We're going to talk about social dilemmas, and then we're going to talk about reducing conflict, the role of threatening, or the role of threat and negotiation. All right, let's get going. So, group decision making. Groups do better than individuals when they rely on the individuals with the most expertise. All right. They also do better if they try to find an answer that helps everyone, not just one individual. Okay, so compromising works well. However, there are circumstances in which groups may not make the best decisions. Lost my moment. Okay. Any aspect of a group interaction that inhibits good problem solving is referred to as process loss. Okay? So again, your book defines process loss as any aspect of the group interaction that inhibits good problem solving. Okay? Now, groups will do well. As I said, groups will do well if they rely on the individuals with the most expertise. All right? But many times, the people with the most expertise, the people who are talented, have to convince the others of their abilities. All right? But that may not happen for a number of reasons. All right? First of all, even though someone may actually be an expert, may actually know more about the topic than the others, most people feel like they know everything that needs to be known. All right? They feel like they're right, even if they're not. Okay? And few people will admit if they don't know something. Okay? Also, a group might not really try very hard to find its most competent members. All right? It's also possible that those most competent individuals, those people with the talent, those experts, don't speak up because they feel that if they did, that would be dissenting from the group. So there are a number of reasons why the most talented person might not be identified or listened to. Communication problems can also lead to process loss. Sometimes members of groups don't listen to each other. Sometimes the dominant member of a group, the leader or whatever, is given the floor most often. Other people will hush when that dominant member starts to talk. Okay, so that can lead to communication problems. Also, people might not share unique information that they might have. People tend to focus on the information they have in common. Your book talks about this really cool study where in one condition they had groups of 4 and everybody in the group was given the same information. And they were given information about 2 candidates. I believe hire for a job. I'm not really sure about that. But they were given information about 2 candidates. Everybody was given the same information, and that information suggested that candidate A was the best candidate. Lo and behold, candidate A was chosen by the group. In another condition, everybody was given the same 4 pieces of negative information, about candidate A. But then each of the 4 people were given 2 positive pieces of information, but they didn't all have the same 2 pieces. They all had different pieces of positive information. All right. So collectively, they had 8 pieces of positive information about candidate A, but only 4 pieces of negative information. But because they all had those 4 pieces of negative information, that's what they talked about most. It didn't come out that candidate A had more positive characteristics than negative characteristics, because the negative characteristics was what everybody had in common. All right. So, people may not provide unique information because people will tend to focus on the information they have in common with other people. All right. Now, why is that? Why do we focus on information that we share with each other, but not on unique information? Why do we not focus on unique information? Well, common information might give us a sense of social validation. I know it. You know it too. Well, that validates my knowledge. That validates me. Your knowing the same information as I do validates me. So I feel validated. I feel better about that information. So, focusing on information that we have in common can provide social validation. It also, focusing on what we have in common can allow us to compare our information and how accurate we are to others. Focusing on what we have in common makes us feel more accurate. All right. Now, what are some methods for increasing increasing the sharing of unique information, or in general decreasing process length? Well, you can assign expertise. Okay. I've seen this done in classes before, especially research methods class. You'll have someone who's assigned to the statistics part, someone assigned to the literature review part, etc. That's assigning expertise. So when it comes time to defend or show that poster to people, you'll have someone who's able to talk about the introduction, someone able to talk about the statistics, someone able to talk about the methods, etc. All right, so you can assign expertise, and that will help the person with the expertise to offer their information. When you do this, when you assign duties to people, all right, you take advantage of what's called transactive memory. Your book defines transactive memory as combined memory of 2 people that is more efficient than the memory of either individual. And that makes sense. If you assign someone to the introduction, most of what they're going to know is about the introduction. If you assign somebody to the method section, most of what they're going to know is about the method section. But together, they know about the introduction and the methods together. All right, so 2 heads are better than 1 in this situation. Two heads are not always better than 1. Okay. Also, you might keep the group's conversation going on. As time goes on in a conversation, unique information starts getting shared eventually. If the conversation gets continued long enough, you run out of information that you have in common. So you have to start offering unique information. That's a way that you can build process loss. So that's process loss. Okay, so now let's talk about group loss. First, what is groupthink? Groupthink is a kind of thinking in which maintaining group cohesiveness and solidarity is more important than considering the facts in a realistic manner. Groupthink has certain antecedents, certain symptoms, and certain results. And that's what we're going to talk about each one. Antecedents, things that precede it. I really encourage you to read your book for this section as well, because it gives some good illustrations, I think. So I think it would be helpful for you to read the groupthink section of the book. I think it would be helpful for you to read the entire chapter. But if you're skimming and there's only a few areas that you want to really focus on, maybe you should look at this in the process law section. All right. So what are some antecedents? Well, one, a highly cohesive group. Everybody gets along well. Everybody has something in common. Everybody enjoys being in the group together. All right. If the group's isolated, they don't really entertain outside opinions. They only focus on the ideas of people in the group. They isolate themselves from contradictory viewpoints. Right? If you have a directive leader, you got a leader who really knows or really says he knows what should be done. This is what we got to do. Let's do it. So if you have a really directive leader, someone who controls the discussion, makes their desires known. If you have a directive leader, the chances of groupthink occurring are higher. If the group is under a lot of stress, that's another antecedent. If there's a perceived threat to the group, it doesn't necessarily have to be a threat, as long as there is a perceived threat. In World War II, the Nazis made the Jews out to be a threat, even though they weren't a legitimate threat. Right, but there was a perceived threat. Okay. Now, one thing to note is that not all of these things need to be there in order for groupthink to occur. So just keep that in mind. They don't all have to be there. Okay. Now, what are some symptoms of groupthink? Well, there's an illusion of invulnerability. All right. Everybody's doing it in the group. All right. There's no way that we can be touched. Okay. There's no way that I can be touched because everybody in the group is doing this. All right. So there's that illusion that you can't be touched. You are invulnerable. All right. There's the illusion that your group is invulnerable. Again, look at Nazi Germany. They tried to conquer the entire free world. They tried to conquer Russia. Clearly, they did not play risk. If you get that reference, then write me who said that joke, what that reference is to, give it to me in class. If you don't know what that reference is, that's fine. Just tell me what I said. Write another piece of paper and give it to me Monday in class. This is how I'm going to know whether or not you actually watched this thing. Don't worry. If you do turn in that piece of paper, I'll give you an extra credit point on your next test. Okay, so another symptom. Illusion of invulnerability. Okay. Also, they feel like there's this, that everybody thinks the same. So there's this illusion of unanimity. There's this illusion that the group is unanimous in their decisions, in the decisions they make. All right. They believe in the correctness of their group. All right. Again, the Nazi Germans thought what they were doing was the right thing. All right. Well, obviously, I'm sure not all of them did. Schindler's List. Right. Um, they also have a stereotyped view of outgroup members. So, for example, most Republicans think that Democrats are all godless socialists, whereas all Democrats, I'm making very broad generalizations. Let me say that this is obviously not true for all Republicans or all Democrats, but you find this to be the case many times. Many Democrats will feel that Republicans are fascist zealots. All right. So there's a groups have a stereotyped view of outgroups. Okay. Within a group in which groupthink is occurring, you have direct pressure to conform. All right, and that direct pressure will lead to self-censorship. Someone might find themselves thinking, I don't know if I agree with that, but they won't say anything. They censor themselves. Okay? If they do speak up, other people in the group in which groupthink is occurring will shut them up. Those people are called mind guards. Alright, so these are some of the symptoms of groupthink. I'm running out of room, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to erase the antecedents and symptoms and focus on the results, okay? Okay. So what are some results of groupthink? Well, they don't survey all the alternatives. So there's an incomplete survey of alternatives. They don't critically examine the alternative that they prefer. So there's a failure to examine the risks of the preferred alternative. They don't really seek out all the potential information. And there's a failure to develop contingency plans because they're so sure that their plan will work. Again, if someone does doubt that their plan will work, they're going to censor themselves. And if they don't, if they don't shut themselves up, somebody else will. All right, so you get that failure to consider alternatives. Now, how can we avoid groupthink? How can we avoid groupthink? Well, we can maintain an impartial leader. We can look to get those outside opinions. We could create subgroups. That way, little pockets of our group, they might come up with alternatives, but since they're still part of our group, we'll feel less opposed to hearing their thoughts. Okay. We also might seek anonymous opinions. So, if there's no threat of people knowing what you said, there's less of a need to censor yourself. Also, if nobody knows who said what, mind guards can't work. You could threaten nobody better dissent, but if you're doing it anonymously, no one's going to know who did. So, seeking anonymous opinions can kind of free up or help to alleviate anyway, poor information search, incomplete survey of alternatives, and a failure to examine the risks of the favored alternative. That, my friends, is group decision making, process law, and groupthink. Okay? Alright, so we've talked about group decision making. So now let's talk about group polarization. Alright? Your book defines group polarization as the tendency for groups to make decisions that are more extreme than the initial inclinations of its members. Alright? So if a group member was initially risky, the group will make them riskier. Alright? If the members of a group were initially conservative, being in the group will make them more conservative. Okay, now there are two potential reasons that might occur. One, they might encounter new persuasive arguments. So if you're already conservative, you come into a conservative group, you might start hearing new arguments for your conservative beliefs, arguments that you had never considered before. Since they confirm your beliefs, they make your belief stronger. They make it more certain. They polarize it. It makes you more conservative. If you didn't necessarily have conservative viewpoints, they were more moderate. When you join a conservative group, and this can happen in the opposite direction with liberals as well. But if you were more moderate, you join a conservative group. Hearing those new persuasive arguments that you've never considered before might make you less certain of your original position. So if we have a continuum of, again, let's stick with the conservative example. All right. So 1, you're not at all conservative. 7, you're extremely. So let's say initially you're about a 5. Okay? Hearing those new persuasive arguments that confirm your conservative viewpoint could push you closer to 7. They might make you, 5.5 or 6, maybe even 7. All right. If you're more moderate, all right. So let's say you're a 2. Okay. So let's say you're a 2. Hearing those persuasive arguments for conservatism is going to make you more uncertain of this position. Okay? So, people who are already conservative are made more conservative, and people who are moderate become less certain in their moderate beliefs. So they could potentially, or they might object less to those conservative beliefs. All right, so the group as a whole gets polarized, and individual beliefs can get polarized. Okay. Another reason is social comparison. You want to have accurate beliefs. You want to be accepted. So you might adopt the views of your group, all right, in order to be accepted. In fact, you may even go beyond the beliefs of the group and even go further than the group, making you polarized. An example of this, if I could show you in class, I would love to, because it's from Arrested Development. It's one of my. I'm addicted to the show. But there's a scene where Maybe and George Michael has joined the play because Maybe was in it. If you're not familiar with Arrested Development, I apologize. But Maybe drops the play, says she doesn't like plays, and then George Michael says, "Oh yeah, I hate plays. Don't ever want to be in plays." It's an example. All right, he didn't really give a crap about plays, but he wants to fit in with Maybe. So he polarized. All right. So that's group polarization. All right, guys. So we've talked about groupthink, group decision making, all that good jazz. Now we're going to talk about group leaders. What makes a good leader? Now, there's the great person theory. All right, the idea that certain key personality traits make a person a good leader, regardless of the situation. Wow, I look very disheveled, don't I? I apologize for that. Anyway, is there any correlation between personal characteristics and good leaders? Well, yes, but the relationships are pretty weak. All right. In fact, for presidents, the best indicators of leadership quality were height, the taller the better, family size, those from smaller families were better, and the number of books published prior to office. The more books, the better. All right. So there are other personality traits that correlate, but only correlate weakly. So intelligence, extroversion, driven by the desire for power, charisma. What seems to make a better leader is the style they apply and whether they apply it in the appropriate situation. So we're talking about leadership styles. If we're talking about transactional leaders, we're talking about leaders who set clear short-term goals and reward people who meet those goals. All right? So they make sure that the needs of the organization are met, and they make sure that things run smoothly. Transformational leaders, however, inspire followers to focus on common long-term goals. So they think outside of the box. They identify good long-term goals. All right, and then they inspire their followers to pursue those goals. All right. So the best leaders are those who adopt both styles at the appropriate time. Now, what the type of group and type of situation facing the group matter. So, what type of leader is best depends on the group. So what type of leader is best depends on the type of group that they're leading and the situation that the group is facing. All right. So we have the contingency theory of leadership. So the right person for the right job, essentially. But your book defines it as the idea that leadership effectiveness depends both on how task-oriented or relationship-oriented the leader is, and on the amount of control and influence the leader has over the group. So there are two types of leaders in this theory. There are task-oriented and relationship-oriented. All right? A task-oriented leader is a leader who is concerned more with getting the job done than with the workers, with their workers' feelings and relationships. Now they do better. They do better in high control work situations or low control work situations. So in high control work situations, the leader has excellent interpersonal relationships with their subordinates. The leadership's position is perceived as powerful, and the work needing to be done is structured and well defined. Also, but in low control work situations, task-oriented leaders do better. So when the leader has poor relationships with the subordinates and the work needing to be done is not clearly identified, task-oriented leaders still do better. Right? They keep them to the task. Now, when the leader is relationship-oriented, they do better in moderate control. Work situations. All right. In these situations, the group is working fairly smoothly, but some attention needs to be paid to the relationships between the leader and the workers. Make sure hurt feelings get addressed. Also, with leadership, we want to talk about gender and leadership. Typically, men have been leaders. All right. It's been difficult for women to take leadership roles. Now, why is that? Well, one reason may be the glass cliff. All right. So your book, when talking about the glass cliff, refers to typically women are in a position of leadership, and they are chosen for leadership positions that must handle times of crisis or other high failure risk situations. So women are thought to be better at dealing with crises, so they get chosen for leadership in these crisis situations. But crisis situations tend to be high risk. There's a high chance for failure. So women will look bad often when chosen for these high risk situations if they fail. And the chances are that they will, just because crisis situations are higher risk and there's a higher chance for failure just because of the situation. It has nothing to do with the leader. All right. Also, certain types of leadership styles are expected in leaders, and men and women tend to have different leadership styles. So women tend to have a more communal leadership style, in which they're concerned with the relatedness, and have a desire for union with others. Men, however, tend to have more of an agentic leadership style, in which they're self-assertive, instrumental, and they have a sense of separateness from others. Now, when women try to assume an assertive leadership role, they start getting looked down on. Women who assume agentic leadership styles, so communal versus agentic. Women who assume agentic leadership styles tend to be viewed negatively. But there is hope. People are becoming more accepting of women in leadership roles. We had a woman in the presidential Democratic presidential primary here several years ago. So women are moving up. They're moving up. All right. So now we've talked about leadership. So now we're going to talk about social dilemmas. Now, your book defines social dilemmas as conflict in which the most beneficial action for an individual will, if chosen by most people, have harmful effects for everyone. All right. So often when we'll study social dilemmas, we will use things like the prisoner's dilemma. It's a game. In this game, you and the partner have two options. And I've tried to write it out here. If you can't read this, this is in your book. So check it out. How much money you and your partner get depends on what choices both you and your partner make. If both of you choose option X, you both get $3. If you choose option X, but your partner chooses option Y, you lose $6, but your partner gains $6. If you switch those so that you choose option Y and your partner chooses option X, you gain the $6 and your partner loses $6. But if you both choose option Y, you both lose $1. So, looking at this, the best way to ensure that both parties make money is if you cooperate and both get little bits of money. So if you both choose option X, so you both get $3, and if that keeps going, you'll both make money. The most appealing option, though, looks to be option Y, because at best you're going to choose you're going to gain $6, but at worst you're going to lose $1. So that at first that looks appealing, but if you think about it, if you keep doing that, you keep choosing option Y, your partner's not going to keep choosing option X, because he's losing $6 every time he does because you keep choosing option Y. So he's going to start choosing option Y as well. When that happens, you both lose $1. And if that keeps happening, you keep trying to get the most money possible, you will both keep losing. So, in the long run, cooperation would seem to be the better strategy. Now, if there is a strategy that seems to be the best, and it's called the tit-for-tat strategy. Sorry, my iPad died again. I wasn't able to charge it very well. So I'm going to have to use the book for this definition. So the tit-for-tat strategy is a means of encouraging cooperation by at first acting cooperatively, but then always responding the way your opponent did, cooperatively or competitively, on the previous trial. So first, you act cooperatively. So in the prisoner's dilemma, you would choose option X, right? But then if they choose option Y, on the next round, you choose option Y. If on that next round, they choose option X, your next turn, you choose option X. Alright? So that tends to be the strategy with the biggest payoff. Sorry, I haven't been using paper notes again. Now, what are some other kinds of social dilemmas? Well, you have public good dilemmas, which are social dilemmas in which individuals must contribute to a common pool in order to maintain public good. So, for example, public schools. The most profitable individual strategy the most profitable individual strategy is to pay the absolute smallest amount to the common good. All right, but you still get the advantage of the common good. But if everybody adopts that strategy, then that common good runs low. So again, if we use the public schools, the best strategy for you individually is to pay as low taxes as you possibly can. All right, but your kids still get the advantage of public schools. But if everybody takes that strategy, nobody wants to pay any taxes to help public schools will become crap. So no one gets to take advantage of it. But if everybody contributes, quality of the public schools goes up. So that's a public goods dilemma. Also, you have commons dilemma, which is a social dilemma in which everyone takes from a common pool of goods that will replenish itself if used in moderation, but will disappear if overused. So I guess if we're also going with taxes, you might look at Social Security. If everybody takes a moderate amount from it, it will replete itself. Let's hope, probably a better one would be crude oil. All right, it does slowly replete itself. All right. So if everybody were to use it moderately, it would over time replenish itself, and it will replenish itself eventually over time. But when everybody's trying to just huge amounts of it, you deplete it faster and it quickly gets to the point where no one has any crude oil. All right. So those are social dilemmas. Last thing we're going to talk about is resolving conflicts. Right. First thing we're going to talk about with resolving conflicts are threats. Okay. It makes sense. If you want somebody to do something, or you don't want them to do something, you threaten them. Surely that will deter them from doing it, right? Problem is that threats tend to not be the most effective way of reducing conflict. All right. First of all, it reduces the overall benefit for both parties. Whereas cooperation, if you were to cooperate, then both parties can benefit. Your study talks about this really fun experiment. Well, I think it's fun, where they had two participants, and each one had a trucking company, Bolt, and I think the other one was Acme. And they had this track. All right, and they each had to get to their destination. So, starting point, ending point for one of them, and this was the starting point for the other, and this was the ending point. Now, the shortest path for both is this lane right here, but it's a one-lane highway, and only one truck can go on it at a time. Now, when neither party could cut this lane off, oh, sorry, I forgot to mention that I believe, participants were paid 60 cents for each trip they made. 1 cent was subtracted for each second it took to make the trip. So this path for both companies is a shorter path, which means fewer seconds will be taken to make the trip, and fewer cents will be taken from that initial 60 cents participants are given. Now, when neither company had any ability to threaten the other, both companies were able to negotiate and find a way that they were both able to cooperate and make the most amount of money. They included two more conditions. In one condition, one of the two companies was given a gate so they could close off the one-lane highway on their end. All right? And you would think that that could be useful to them to threaten the other group not to use that one lane so they can basically monopolize that one-lane highway and they would make more money. No. Typically, what would happen is that the other participant would get almost vengeful, I guess you could say, and they would park their truck on that one-lane highway. So they would essentially make a gate out of their truck. So they would retaliate, and ultimately both lost more money that way. So what if you made the situation equal? Both have a gate. Same thing. Both of them threatened, and both of them ended up losing money. So negotiation tends to be a better way to resolve conflict than is threatening. So you can infer the implications of that for foreign policy or even domestic policy if you want. All right. So if threatening doesn't work, what does? Negotiation. All right. Negotiation is defined as a form of communication between opposing sides in a conflict in which offers and counteroffers are made and a solution occurs only when both parties agree. Now, many times in negotiations, and if you follow the political news at all, many times what will happen in negotiations is people believe that only one party can benefit, or one party in a negotiation. I don't mean political party, but only one of the parties in a negotiation can benefit. And that's kind of the position that the parties in the current political system have taken, and it hasn't worked out for them. The better way is when there's compromise and you seek an integrative solution. Alright, an integrative solution is a solution to a conflict whereby the parties make trade-offs on issues according to their different interests. Alright, each side concedes the most on issues that are unimportant to it, but important to the other side. Alright? So, seeking an integrative solution, compromising in negotiation, tends to work the best in resolving conflicts. So what are the keys to successful negotiation? Well, you want to communicate. How do you want to use your communication? Well, you want to use your communication in such a way as to develop trust with your partner. You also want to discuss your interests openly. All right? You want to seek those integrative solutions, and when negotiating, you want to try and take the perspective of your negotiation partner. These are the keys to good negotiation, to resolving conflicts. All right, there we go. That is group processes, group dynamics. That is chapter 9. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to email me. Yeah. All right. I'll see you on Monday.